I'm going to jump in to our content today and kind of walk you through how to navigate one of those meals, and then we'll be able to answer questions at the end today. And this is still the beginning of me trying virtual workshops, so please bear with me if we have any technical difficulties. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so we can go through this content together. All right, so I mentioned hopefully we're all here for the same reason, to talk about dining etiquette today. This has really been adapted from an etiquette dinner that we offer every semester at U of H. And we have found that it's just been such a popular event. People really want to know more about dining etiquette. So we've launched our workshop series to complement that event. But if it's something you're ever interested in the future, please keep an eye out on our website and our calendar for details about our fall etiquette dinner that will be coming to you. So I mentioned this earlier, some of the reasons for wanting to know more about dining etiquette and how it can be helpful when you are in a meal as part of an interview process. But part of why our etiquette dinner came to campus is also because we were getting feedback from employers that mentioned that this is an area that they could see some room for growth in terms of being more comfortable with dining etiquette. Okay, so I hope that this is helpful for you. So this is kind of the lay of the land for our day today. So we'll start off with talking a little bit about University Career Services and how we can support you, especially now that things are virtual. And I'll also kind of guide you through a typical event where you'll be having a meal. So that starts with when you show up and introduce yourself and ends with a thank you note. So again, I'll guide you throughout what to expect in one of those events. So to start with our office, we serve all students on campus. We also serve students who may be taking classes at the Sugarland site. And I do want you to know that some colleges do have their own career center. So you'll see that in this diagram here, that there are several colleges that have their own career center. If that is the case for you and you fall in one of those colleges, I strongly encourage you to take advantage of the career resources at your college career center, but also with UCS. Okay, so you've got bonus career services if that's the case for you. Some ways that we can support you virtually right now. So we are offering virtual appointments that you can schedule through Cougar Pathway. And we are also offering live chats, which is a great way to just kind of log on and ask any quick questions that might be coming up for you about your career. We also offer a number of virtual events. So one is this workshop that you're attending currently, and we also offer some meet and greets where you can connect virtually with an employer, as well as career fairs too. Some of the resources that we provide include those virtual chats that I mentioned. There's also a resource called VMOC that I'll share more about in a minute. That's a great tool for getting instant resume feedback. We also have a workbook online that you can download for free and covers a number of career topics. And then we also offer some assessments. So these are taken online, and these are some tools that you can use to learn more about yourself and careers that might be a good fit for you. If you're interested in any of the assessments that we offer, I strongly encourage you to make an appointment with a career counselor, and they can talk to you more about your career goals and which assessment might best fit for you. And then another resource we offer is our career closet. So this is a great tool if you're not yet ready to commit to buying a suit or just need to kind of switch up the suits that you're wearing. Our career closet is a place where you can go to rent a suit for $10 for 3 days, and that $10 just covers the dry cleaning fee. So especially if you are invited to an interview or to any kind of formal setting where you'll be having a meal, I do recommend dressing professionally, or again, just dressing at least business casual. And so a blazer can make a really great impact and a suit can make a great impact. So feel free to take advantage of our career closet if that's something that would be helpful for you. So I mentioned this earlier that we have virtual chats or virtual drop-in hours, at least for now. And so these are some of the hours that you can log on to our website. you'll see a red button appear that says need help, and you can click on it to get some quick feedback. Again, this is accessible from our website, so I strongly encourage you to check that out. We also offer VMOC as a resource you can use. I mentioned this a moment ago. So in order to use VMOC resume guide, all you have to do is go to the website listed here, vmoc.com/UH. And you'll be able to create a profile with your UH email address and then be able to upload up to 10 resumes and get instant feedback. So this is really great to see where you stand in comparison to others in your college. But it's also just a great way, again, to get that instant feedback that's very detailed and thorough. And I mentioned our careers workbook, our Coug Careers workbook. Again, this is available on our website, and you can download any resources that might be helpful for you from it. But it does cover everything from what business professional attire would be and what that looks like, to resume and cover letter samples, to job search tips, and the whole gamut. So if there's any career questions you have, this is also a great place to go and get some more information. And then the last resource I want to talk about is Cougar Pathway. So Cougar Pathway is a portal or an icon in your Access UH. And when you're in Cougar Pathway, you can use this to find workshops like this and RSVP to them. You can also apply for jobs, and we have a very wide variety of jobs available on our job board. And you can also use this to schedule appointments. So earlier I mentioned that we have virtual appointments right now. You can log into Cougar Pathway and find the time that works for you and just choose the location, phone or virtual. And that's a great way to schedule those appointments. All right. So I mentioned earlier, I'm going to save questions for the end, but if questions do come up, please go ahead and add them to the chat box, and I'll make sure I address them. So starting with the beginning of an event, right? It starts with your arrival. So you may have heard the saying that to be on time is to be late, and to be late is unacceptable. And that's definitely true of any kind of interview or business meeting that you might be in. So you always want to arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. I personally recommend, if it's a place you've never been, give yourself a little bit more time to figure out or even think about if there's construction or ballet or other things that might be challenging to get you there on time so that you're not rushing. So I recommend personally getting somewhere about 30 minutes before, but don't show directly up to where you're going to meet your host. So if you're going to a restaurant, for example, I recommend maybe spending some time in your car going over your resume again, freshening up. You can always, use powder room, but give yourself that time to get settled. And then when it's 10 to 15 minutes before your actual start time, then you can go in and introduce yourself to the host or let whoever you're meeting with know that you are there, okay? You don't wanna just show up too early because your host may not be ready for you. So imagine if you had a friend that was coming over in a time of not social distancing, of course, but imagine you had a friend coming over and they showed up 30 minutes before when you thought they were going to arrive. You may not be ready for them, right? You might still be getting prepared. And so the same might be true of a future employer or host. Okay, so make sure that you're not catching them off guard. At some events like career fairs, conferences, you may be given a name tag. If that's the case, you want to place the name tag on the right side of your jacket. Okay, so on your right side. So it might look reversed with me on the camera. But that's important because whenever you reach out your right hand to shake hands, it'll bring your name tag a little bit forward and easier to read. You'll also notice that most jackets will have a pocket on the left side. So it might be hard to see in the light here, but I have a pocket on the left side of my jacket. And that's a good reminder that that means my name tag is going to go on the right side. Okay, so not on the side with the pocket, but on the other side. I recommend turning off cell phones. So it's very common in meetings to have a phone out, but maybe on silent. But especially if you're in an interview, I would say put it away because you don't want anything to distract you. And even if you're not looking at your phone, just the presence of it might indicate to others at your table that you are not fully engaged with them because you're ready to look at your phone at any time. So I do recommend just turning it completely off. You can even leave it in your car, leave it in a bag somewhere, but do keep it off and away during the time you're in a business dinner or meeting. Now, if you're expecting a phone call, just make sure that you let the people you're dining with know ahead of time, so that way they're not surprised if you have to kind of leave mid-event to go take your call. And you don't need to give a lot of detail about what the call is for. You can simply just acknowledge that you're expecting a really important phone call that you'll have to take and will need to step away and may need to step away at some point. And then when that happens, you can again excuse yourself to take the call. So if I don't take the call at the table, if you are expecting a call, okay? When introducing yourself, you will address others by saying Mr., Miss, Doctor, but using part of their title in the name, right? So if I'm meeting with President Couture, I would call her President Couture. I wouldn't just call her by her first name. And so always use that as a more formal approach until someone tells you otherwise. With females, it's more professional to use Miss versus Mrs., and you also don't want to assume someone's marital status. So please keep that in mind as well when you're introducing yourself to others. This is also true when you're introducing other people to each other. So when you are introducing two people to each other, you'll introduce them based on the highest ranked person. So I'll give an example of what that means. So if I am introducing the general manager of a company to one of my peers or maybe a new hire, I'm going to address the general manager first. So I would say, Dear John, the general manager, I'd like you to meet Priyanka, our new employee. And then Priyanka, I'd like you to meet our general manager, Joe. Okay, so that's the way I'm going to address them first, is simply by saying their name. Now remember, the most important person in a room is always your client or your customer. So the same thing is true if I'm introducing, let's say, our director, Monica, to a student named Chris. I am going to address Chris first because he's our student, he's the customer, he's the client, he's the most important person. This would be at least at Career Services because students are definitely, our clients and students come first. So think about that in your industry too. So your clients are always going to be addressed first because they will always outrank anybody else, okay? So I have a sample networking intro here. I really encourage you to think about your pitch and how you would want to introduce yourself, whether it's at a networking event, at a business event, or if you just happen to run into someone who might have a great opportunity for you. So a couple of things to think about when you're introducing yourself is to really give your name, a little bit about the past work experience or any highlights that you'd want to share, and also include your future goals too. So you'll see an example here. When we give our pitch or our intro or answer that question, tell me about yourself, we usually aren't speaking at someone. So think about it. When you speak with your friends, you're not just talking at them for a minute or two. You're usually starting a conversation. And so here I've got some ideas of how you might just kind of start the conversation and keep it going. And this will of course change depending on who you're talking to and what the setting is. But just to give you an idea, I'll read through the screen here. So maybe someone is saying, hi, my name is Sam. I'm a junior at U of H and I'm pursuing a degree in communication. I've recently organized and launched a successful social media campaign for the AMA student chapter at U of H. So I'm just giving a little bit of information about myself, and then, or the person's just giving a little information about themselves. And they might say, wow, that's so interesting. Tell me more about that. You'd say, yes, as a marketing chairperson, I increased our chapter's Facebook fans by 200%. So it's a really great achievement to share. And as a result of this experience, it's piqued my interest in social media, especially opportunities in sports advertising. And then from there, you could end it with a question. So this person asked, do you know anyone who works in marketing? You could think about, yeah, what has been your experience with marketing, or what has been your experience with social media or different campaigns? What kind of things are you interested in? So again, the idea is not to just give a speech at someone, but to start a conversation based on maybe finding some potential shared interests or career goals too, okay? So I really encourage you, we won't have time today to create your pitch, but I really encourage you to think about how you'd want to introduce yourself. And we've got some really great resources in our Coug Careers workbook. We actually have a handout where you can create your own elevator pitch. So feel free to refer to that if that's helpful for you. All right, so let's say you showed up, you've introduced yourself. Now it's time to be seated. So it is okay to go ahead and seat yourself before the event officially begins. The way you'll know that the event is officially starting is that your host will usually acknowledge everyone in the room and thank them for coming. So this could be true at an interview, also at banquets or other kinds of gatherings where there's a meal. So you'll want to wait to put the napkin in your lap until you have that official welcome and it's time to begin, okay? Now, once you have that, there's a couple ways that you'll fold your napkin. So if you identify as female or prefer those pronouns of she, her, or hers, what you would do is you would fold your napkin in half, kind of like a hot dog, okay? And so you'll fold it in half with the folded part of the napkin across your lap, okay? So again, let's say your napkin is, there's a couple different ways it could look. Your napkin could look like a swan in your coffee cup, or it could be the holder for all of your utensils. But what you'll do is you'll gently, not kind of rapidly open it, but gently open it so that it makes a large rectangle, and then you will fold that rectangle in half once, okay? And then the folded part will be on your lap with the fold closest to you. Now, if you identify as male or use the pronouns he, him, or his, you'll fold the napkin, you'll do the same thing, you'll unfold the napkin really gently, but you'll fold it to where the edges of the napkin across from each other get together so it looks like a diamond or like a triangle. And you'll have the triangle just across one of your knees. It doesn't matter which one, it's just whichever one you're more comfortable with. Now really where this comes from is how people tend to sit. So typically, someone who identifies as female may be more likely to cross their ankles or cross their legs. And that's where that style of folding the napkin is going to be most comfortable to cover all of their lap. Now, if someone identifies as male, they tend to sit with a wider gait. And so that is why having the napkin on one knee is going to do a better job of covering the lap in case anything falls, okay? So really it comes down to your comfort level. If there's a certain way that you sit that's more comfortable for you, feel free to adjust how you place the napkin on your lap. If you need to get up and excuse yourself, you will put the napkin to the right of your plate. So a great tip to remember is that you'll be right back. So that's a good reminder to have everything on the, or have your napkin on the right. And then if you're done, you'll place it to the left of the plate, okay? Now, if your napkin drops or if anything drops on the floor, you just want to leave it there. So avoid awkwardly bending over and hitting the person next to you, or grabbing something that might be dirty off of the ground. Just leave it and ask your server for another napkin. Sometimes at nice restaurants too, people will replace your napkin with a napkin that matches either your pant or skirt, and that's just to avoid any lint showing up on your clothes. So if that happens, don't be too surprised if someone shows up and changes out your napkin for you. A couple reminders: we won't use the napkin as a bib for wiping teeth or blowing your nose. So if you need to blow your nose, please excuse yourself and go to the restroom. Same thing if you need to wipe your teeth. Even with lobster, we don't want to use napkin as a bib. So just make sure to place it in your lap, okay? So you've placed the napkin in your lap, and now you're looking at the table in front of you and thinking, oh my goodness, what do I do with all of this? Now, keep in mind, if you're at a banquet table or like a round table, typically these place settings are placed together very, very closely. So looking at this diagram, you'll see that there's a bread plate on the left. A lot of times your neighbor's water glass is going to be right next to it. So it can be really hard to tell where your plates and glasses start and stop and the other person's begins. So I want to give you a little bit of some tips to how to navigate this. So we always want to use silverware from the outside in. So you'll notice on the outside, you'll have your salad fork and potentially a soup spoon. So that'd be used in your first course or an appetizer. Then once you're finished with your meal, those will be taken away and you'll be left with your dinner fork and your dinner knife. And then once the entree is taken away, then you'll have your dessert spoon and cake fork at the top. A couple ways to know whether to use the dessert spoon or fork is what your dessert is provided to you in. So if it's in a bowl, you'll typically use the dessert spoon. If it's provided on a plate, you'll typically use the cake fork. And we'll talk more about desserts later today. Typically your glasses are placed from like lightest to darkest. You'll see water, maybe wine glasses, and then a coffee cup. We'll talk more about alcohol in a minute, but if it's placed on your table, that's typically going to be the order of it. And that could be true for a glass of tea as well. You'll notice on this diagram that the napkin is placed to the left. So sometimes the napkin will be placed in your saucer. Sometimes it'll be placed on the salad plate or on the entree plate. So don't let those things throw you off. Just be flexible if you see the napkin someplace else than on this diagram. A really great way to remember which bread plate or water glass is yours is to put your hands just like this. So if you connect your index finger and your thumb, it makes what looks like to you a B and a D. Okay, so it's a great way to remember that on your left is your bread plate and on your right are your drinks. And so should you ever show up at an event and you can't remember whose glass of water is yours, just pull out your quick B and D and it'll be a great refresher before you jump into your meal. You'll notice here that we do have a bread plate on this diagram. Sometimes a bread plate is not provided. If that's the case, then you can wait to have bread with your entree. So typically that just signals that the bread is to be had with the entree, not the salad or not the appetizer. And then you'll just place the bread on the corner of your entree plate. All right. So you've taken a look at the lay of the land. You've seen all of the things that are in front of you. You have your napkin on your lap. Now it's time to wait to get ready to actually have the meal. So a couple reminders is to wait to eat until your host begins eating and then follow the pace of the table. So you don't necessarily want to be the first one done way before everybody else because it might look like you came just for the food and we don't want that. You don't want to be the last person to where everyone is waiting on you. So really take a peek and be mindful of how fast everyone else is eating as well. If the host just forgets to begin eating, or let's say you're at a banquet and there's maybe 100 different tables, if that's the case, then you can go ahead and wait until everyone at your table is served. If grace is something that's part of your practice or saying grace before a meal, I recommend saying grace maybe in your car or in a restroom or somewhere before you are with everyone else at the table, just because that is something that's very personal and you're at a place with potentially a lot of strangers, okay? So just be mindful of that. There are going to be some community items on your table. So sometimes there might be a community water pitcher, there's salt and pepper, maybe a bread basket, dressing, creamer for your coffee. All of those things may be offered to you in the middle of the table for everyone to share. So a great way to share is whoever is closest to that item, let's say it's the sugar packets, that's going to be the person to start passing. So if I'm closest to the sugar packets, I'm going to grab them and I will offer them to the person to my left. Then I'll offer them to the person to my right. Then I'll serve myself and then pass to the right. okay? So the same is true for bread. Anything that is shared in the meal or at your table, you will pass to the left, pass to the right, then serve yourself and pass to the right, okay? I usually recommend letting other people serve themselves, but holding on to the container. So for example, if I'm passing salad dressing will typically be served on a saucer. So I might hold the saucer and let the person next to me grab the dressing off of the saucer, and then I'll take it back from them when they're done. The reason I recommend that is because, and same thing goes for bread, I would hold the bread basket and let the person next to me serve themselves. But the reason for that is sometimes those things can go rogue and just start going around the table. So that's a way to have a little bit more control over passing to your left, to your right, and then to yourself. Okay. With salt and pepper, those again you're going to pass them in the same way. Typically those are shared for the table, but you do want to pass them together. So even if someone asks for salt, you want to serve pepper too. So think about them as like a couple on their wedding day. They just cannot be separated. They have to be together the whole time. Okay, so always keep them together. With that though, you want to be mindful not to season before tasting, because it can come off as rude if you haven't tried the dish before you add more seasoning to it. It could look kind of rude to the chef, but also remember you're in an interview process and people are looking at how you are interacting with the servers, each other, even the meal. And so sometimes people might make assumptions about you and how you might be in the workplace just based on how you season. So if you season before tasting, some employers will actually see that as that you make decisions before you get all the information that you need to make a good decision. Okay, so keep in mind that something as small as seasoning can really translate, or people at least can make assumptions about how that might translate to the work setting. Okay. So I know I'm sharing a lot of information. So again, if questions come up, please feel free to add them to the chat box and I'll be sure to address them at the end of our time today. We also have a handout with information about a lot of the things I'm covering today. So I'll provide my email at the end, and if you would like a handout with some of the recap from today, I'm happy to email that to you too, just so in case you're quickly taking notes as we go. Okay, so we've talked about how to get ready for the meal. Usually one of the first things will be the bread and butter that you'll eat with your appetizer, typically. Not always, but typically. With bread and butter, usually bread will be served in like a bread basket. Sometimes it'll be already served on a bread plate for you. But whenever you are eating bread, you'll typically just break the bread in half and then butter as you eat. So you'll pull off one piece from that half and just butter that piece. The exception to that is if you're given freshly baked hot bread, you want to go ahead and butter it entirely because the butter is going to spread a lot better that way. That's really the purpose of this, is what's going to make it easiest for you to spread the butter. So with that, remember you will be given a butter knife. This is only to be used for spreading butter on your bread. Don't use it to cut your bread, okay? It's actually appropriate to pull the bread apart with your hands. There are some breads that are a little bit harder. Those breads will be provided with a knife typically to cut them. I think about like hard French bread and things like that. It may be really tempting, but try to avoid soaking up sauces with your bread. Keep that when you're at home with your friends. But it's just not as professional or appropriate to soak up sauces with your bread, as good as it is. Save that for when you're at home and not when you're someone who's trying to give you a job. Bread can definitely be messy, so if crumbs fall on the table, that's okay. Just let them stay there. Typically, your server will come by with a bread scraper and remove those for you. If there is a softer crumb, let's say like a piece of butter, that you can always take off the linen and put right back on your plate. Something I didn't mention earlier with things being on the table is once you use a utensil, it never rests back on the table again. So a dirty utensil should never be back on that nice pretty linen that you'll probably have on the table, okay? So I'll show you some place setting options for where you can place your fork and knife, but keep that in mind that once you've used utensil, you will want to rest it on a plate and not put it back on the table. All right. Another part of the appetizer or the first course is going to be maybe a soup or a salad. If you're having soup, you'll want to just avoid putting your face completely to the bowl. So make sure you're bringing the soup to your mouth and not kind of head planting into the bowl. And definitely don't slurp. So if soup is really hot, just give it a minute. You don't even need to blow on it. Just let it rest and take that as some more time to get to talk to your neighbors and get to know the people at your table. With salads, a salad knife isn't always provided, but if it's not, I really encourage you to ask for one. A lot of times salad leaves look like they're going to be really easy to eat, but can really be large. So to avoid kind of cramming salad leaves into your mouth, cut them with a knife so it's just more manageable for you to eat. If the salad leaf falls off the plate, kind of like the butter, just quickly grab it and put it on the side of your plate. You can be really discreet about that. And I think that's all I have for soups and salads, okay? Sometimes the salad will be preset, meaning it's already sitting at your table when you arrive. Other times it may be provided to you one at a time. So for example, your salad plate might be given to you by your server and then taken away, and then your entree will be brought to you and then taken away. But sometimes it's preset and already on the table when you sit down. So this gets us to ordering from the menu. So again, sometimes things are going to be preset. So there may be times where you go to a banquet or an interview and your options may vary. So it could be that you have an entire menu to pull from. It could be that you have a prefix menu where you can pick maybe one of a few options for each course. Or it might be that the entire menu has already been given to you. It's really important that if you do have any dietary concerns or allergies or anything like that, that you share those with your host beforehand so that way they can accommodate you as much as possible. And it's not something to be shy about. So I'll say I'm vegetarian, and so I always want to make sure that my host knows, so that way I don't show up somewhere and I am not able to eat what's provided, because I don't want to be in that situation where it looks rude if I'm not eating the meal that's provided to me. So it's better to be vocal and let your host know ahead of time. It's also important to never go to a business dinner hungry. You never know, to that same point, you never know what's going to be served. And so let's say someone gives you green beans and you just hate green beans. You still want to at least just try to take a couple bites, at least try it. But you just never know if you're going to love what's served for you. You also don't want to go so hungry that you're just distracted by the food and not able to focus on the conversations with the people at your table. So I always recommend having a little snack before you go to a business dinner. If you do have a chance to order from your menu, so let's say you are given free range, it's not a preset menu, just be mindful of what you order. So try to avoid things like long pastas, anything that would be like finger food. Just to try to order things that are going to be really manageable for you. Now, typically, if someone else has chosen the menu for you, they are going to be mindful of those things as well. But just keep that in mind. Whatever you can order that is going to be easiest for you to eat, so that way you're not getting your hands dirty, or you're not getting really messy, or just kind of stressed about, staining yourself because what you ordered was really hard to eat. Also, don't order the most expensive thing. This may not be the time to get the filet mignon, but also don't order the cheapest thing either. It's okay to get something that's in the middle. Now, all of this is a lot to think about. So I know I am very indecisive when I am getting ready to eat. And so if you just need another minute and a server comes to you and asks what you want, I'm gonna say that you need another minute and let them go around to the table and then come back to you later so that you're not holding up the table. I kind of alluded to this earlier. With alcohol, sometimes there may be wine glasses or other things like that on the table, and there may even be other people at the event or at your table that are having alcohol. I strongly discourage that for a couple of reasons. One, if you're under 21, definitely do not partake in that. But even if you're over 21, this is a time where you're trying to make a really great first impression. You may already be a little bit nervous. And so having full control of all of your faculties is going to be so important so that you can make the best first impression. And sometimes alcohol can inhibit us from doing that. Now, a couple exceptions here is for those of you who are in the hospitality industry or service industry where part of your job is going to be maybe serving wine or tasting wine, things like that. If that's part of your job, I would say you might anticipate that, but otherwise I don't recommend it. And if other people are drinking and you don't feel comfortable, it's just keep in mind that you're also interviewing the company too. So if there's any kind of culture you get about alcohol that doesn't feel comfortable for you, just keep that as your own mental note about whether or not that company is a good fit for you. And I will say too, it's very common for companies to have happy hours, but those take place after you already have the job. So just keep that in mind. When you're first networking and first meeting people, you're still trying to make that first impression. So it is different than a company happy hour after you already have the job. All right, so we've talked about ordering from the menu. So now your food arrives. There's a couple of ways that you can approach eating your meal. So you may or may not even be aware that you're already doing one of these. But I find that the best way to show this is through a video. So I'm going to show you a brief 2-minute video that is going to demonstrate to us these two styles of dining.
Lauren, are you showing the video?
Yes, can you see it?
No, we cannot see the video.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, there were a couple of comments.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I wonder why it's not showing. Thank you for that, Priyanka. This is why it's good to have team members in a virtual workshop. So let's see. Get back to our Zoom. Okay, so it looks like it stopped presenting. So I'm sorry about that. I'm going to try this one more time. Let's see here. I'm going to try this. Can everyone see this now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and just start us back a little bit. So this is, she's going to help me. This is Leontina, and she's going to help me show these two different styles of guiding.
Oh, we can't hear her.
Oh no. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll kind of walk through what she's saying. So she's talking, there's two different styles of dining. So one is American and one is continental. And so the way that they are different is that typically for American style of dining, which is very common in the US, or if you grew up in the US, you may be doing this and not even realize that there is a name for it. But what you'll do is you would hold your knife in your dominant hand. and your fork in your non-dominant hand, and you'll cut one piece, and then you'll set the knife at the top of the plate, and then you would switch hands. So now your dominant hand would have the fork, and you would eat with that dominant hand. So I'm going to have her just demonstrate that really quickly since I'm not in person to show this to you. She's saying have your knife in your dominant hand, fork in your non-dominant hand. We'll cut one piece at a time. Okay, so what she just did is she placed the knife, after cutting a piece, she'll place the knife at the top of the plate with the blade facing towards her, and then her dominant hand is now free to take the fork with the food in it. Okay, so that's what American style dining looks like. And we'll do a quick demo of continental. Continental actually is going to look the exact same. The only difference is that you don't switch hands. So the food that, or the hand that already has the fork, you'll just use that to eat off of. So I'll have her demonstrate this for us.
Maybe at the end of the workshop, if you can copy and paste the link for the video into the comments, people can watch it later.
Okay, great idea.
And somebody also said to turn on the captions on, so.
Good idea, good idea. Okay.
There's a way to share the voice of, or the sound of your computer whenever you share the screen. It's an option at the bottom of the window whenever you make the decision to share the screen.
Okay, thank you, Jad. I appreciate that.
No problem.
All right. So what I'll do though for now, I think that's a great idea, is I can share the link to this. I will go back to here. Can everyone see my PowerPoint presentation now?
No, it's still on the video.
Okay, let's go to, thank you all. Okay.
It's on now.
All right, thank you. I appreciate everyone's participation. So again, the main difference between these two styles of dining is that with American style, you'll switch hands. And then with continental style, you'll keep your fork in the same hand and just eat with that same hand that already has the fork. Okay, but I'll definitely share the video for that at the end and share the link to it. So thank you all for being so understanding, as this is the first time presenting this virtually. So lots of new things to figure out as we go. But thank you for that. So once you are finished eating, what you'll do is you'll put your utensils at what we call 10 and 4. So it'll look just like this image where the knife blade is going to be facing your fork with the tines facing down, and they'll be faced so that the top of the utensils are at what we would call 10 on your clock, and the bottom of the utensils will be placed at 4 on a clock. Okay. Sometimes you might want to help the server out by stacking your plates together and pushing them out of your way, but go ahead and leave them. This is a really great signal to your server that you are done with your meal, as well as placing the napkin to the left of the plate. And so those things will signal to your server that you are done. Okay. And then the last course typically is going to be dessert and coffee. If you're not interested in having coffee, you can simply place your saucer down so that the rim of the saucer is facing on the, the rim of the cup is on the saucer. With desserts, if dessert is not already provided to you, it typically is, but if it's not, I would say definitely don't go out of your way to order one. The same is true as if everyone is getting dessert, just stick to having one versus getting multiple. If you want to share a dessert with someone else, that's totally fine, but just ask for another plate so that way your server can prepare that for you so you're not sharing on the same plate. So if you think about the people that you share meals with, they typically tend to be people you already have a pretty close relationship with. And this is typically going to be an event where there's people you don't know that well and it's a professional setting. And so this just isn't that same intimate experience where you're going to share on the same plate. Okay, so definitely ask for another plate. Also at the end of the meal, it may be common to, maybe at home, let's say you like to have tea or something like that. I know I like to have tea after a meal. But keep in mind, if you're going to a banquet or you're at a place where the menu is already set, usually the kitchen has already arranged a certain set of things to serve for you and may not have other things available, or at least not readily available. So avoid asking for things that aren't already offered to you, either through your preset meal or through the menu. So I do avoid requesting other things like tea if that's not already part of the banquet service, okay? So as you are talking through everything with other people at your meal, just try to keep the conversation light. So earlier someone asked, you know, what kind of questions should I expect? Really, people won't be treating it like a full formal interview typically, because they are trying to get to know you in a more natural, relaxed setting. But that said, you don't want to be talking about anything negative, because you don't want your first impression to be that you were that person that complained about everything or had that bad breakup or had a terrible tragedy. So try to keep the conversation light. So I recommend talking about maybe your career goals and interests, hobbies that you have, maybe some entertainment, but look for things and interests that you have in common. But really do try to avoid talking about things that can be polarizing or where you're likely to maybe not agree with other people at your table. Just again, you're trying to make a good first impression. So avoid things like politics, religion, any health issues. Again, sexual references that just aren't appropriate in a professional setting. Don't talk about the last breakup you just had. Again, keep it professional. We also want to avoid talking about money. So this is not the time to ask about salary or to negotiate your salary. Sometimes an employer may bring that up. If that's the case, always try to put the conversation back on them to be the one to wait to give you an offer, and then you could talk more about salary at a later time. But really it's best to have an offer, which usually won't happen at the table. Usually that would happen later on down the road. We actually offer a salary negotiation workshop, so keep an eye out for that if that's something you're wanting to know more about and want some more help navigating. A friendly reminder as you're interacting with other people at the event or at your table to ask questions of other people. So don't just talk about yourself the whole time. You really want to show that you're engaged and interested in others. And again, just stay positive, okay? You want that to be part of your first impression. And really, because your first impression is going to be what people think about you and how you'll be on your team. So if you are complaining about the food or the service, they might assume that you're like that on their team too. And nobody wants to work with someone who's negative on their team. This reminds me that part of the interview process is you'll be evaluated based on how you treat the servers and how you deal with if the food doesn't come out just the way you wanted it. So keep in mind that how you navigate all of those things are also part of your interview process. I believe it's Bill Gates that is known for, at least in the past, he would intentionally have a server ruin the food that was given to someone he was interviewing because he wanted to see how they treated the server and how they responded to the situation. So how do you problem solve when that happens? And should that happen to you, maybe the food isn't exactly what you expected, you know, it kind of depends on how you want to navigate that. You can always discreetly tell your server, you know, this wasn't what I ordered, or I thought it would be like this. Now let's say you already have eaten like half of your meal and you find a hair or something that you just don't want to eat. If there's a foreign item in your food, like a bone, what you can do is bring your napkin to your mouth and use that to set it aside, bring it back out of your mouth and set it aside on your plate. And you don't have to continue eating. I think the main thing is just to show that you've kind of at least tried the food, so you're being respectful. But gauge how the rest of the table is doing. If the rest of the table is also already halfway through their meal or finishing their meal, there may not be time for your server to go back and create a whole nother meal for you because the whole table would be waiting on you. So that's just something to kind of navigate, like the timing of it. and what it is that makes it not doable to eat. But no matter what, always be positive, be lighthearted about it if it happens, and just be really discreet when you're communicating with your server too and being respectful of them. You definitely don't need to announce at your table. So again, just be discreet. When it's time for the bill to come, typically whoever is the host is going to pay. This actually is true of any kind of meal that you might have. So even if someone invites you for coffee, usually the person who is doing the inviting may be the one offering to pay. So keep that in mind too if you ever invite someone out for a meal, that you would then be the host. Now this isn't always the case, but it typically is. So if there's some reason though that you are, either you are the host or you are going to be paying for your meal, keep in mind gratuity. So I definitely recommend 20 to 25% for our wonderful servers. So do be prepared to tip, and there's a tipping guide here. You definitely don't need to comment on the cost of the meal. So typically you're going to be an expensive date because there's usually going to be nice food and a lot of people and several courses. So you just don't need to comment on it. Just take it for what it is. I also recommend always bringing cash with you because you never know if you are going to be the one still paying for at least your portion of the meal. And you also never know if there's going to be valet or what the situation might be. So always have some cash ready with you. I wanted to bring up a couple considerations for if you are attending a reception or a mixer. So these are a little bit different than banquets, but can definitely still be part of an interview process. So it's really common for people to have receptions or mixers before or after a career fair or other kinds of career-related events. Now at these events, it's a little bit different because you'll be standing. You typically aren't seated at the table. Food will usually be on the sides of the room. You can kind of grab what you want, place it on a plate, and there may be a spot to sit, but also sometimes people are kind of walking around with their plate of food. And so just be mindful that you don't have both of your hands full to where if you want to meet someone and shake their hand that you aren't able to do so, okay? It can also make it just kind of awkward when you greet someone and both of your hands are full. So just something to be mindful of. Regardless of the event that you attend, it's always important to close out by thanking everyone that you met with. So definitely thank your host, but also still say thank you and goodbye to all the people that you interacted with at your table, because all of these people could be part of your network too. So it's important to address everyone at the table so that you really enjoy getting to talk to them, and hope they have a good evening. With your host in particular, or the person who is going to be leading your interview process, you definitely want to ask them about next steps in the interview process if you haven't already done so, or if they haven't already given you that information. And then you also want to send them a follow-up thank you note. My personal recommendation is to send some snail mail as a thank you note, and then also to write an email. The reason for that is because you want to send an email for sure that addresses something that you learned about the career, either the job or the opportunity or that person. So include something personal about your conversation with them and why you really appreciated the meal and the opportunity. But then also send them something by snail mail. So an email will arrive instantly and you want to send that within 24 hours. But the snail mail is great because it will actually show up in their office a few days later, and it's a physical reminder in their office of you and of you as a candidate. And it's also just so personal, and people love getting mail, so it's just a nice touch. So I recommend doing both. Okay, that's a great time again to say what you appreciated about the opportunity and just to restate your interest in the position. So I have a couple of frequently asked questions I want to go through together to make sure we've covered everything today. So hopefully everyone knows the side of their name tag, which side their name tag belongs on, and that is the right side of their jacket. When to start eating. So you'll start eating when the host begins and gives the official welcome, or when everyone at your table has been served. All right, which utensil do I use first? So remember, you're gonna work from the outside in. So typically your salad fork or salad knife or soup spoon are gonna be used first. And then where should I put my hands or elbows? So we actually didn't cover this earlier, but typically you'll want to keep your hands in your laps. You don't want elbows on the table while there's food on the table, but actually once the food has been completely cleared and you're waiting for maybe the bill, or you're kind of saying goodbye to everyone and still talking, at that point it is okay to have your elbows on the table, but definitely not when there's still food. All right, what should I do if I eat something that I don't want to swallow? So what you'll do is, again, remember, put the napkin to your mouth and then discreetly put it back on your plate. Should I order alcohol? No. Remember those considerations we talked about today. And then where should I put my napkins? Remember, if you identify as female or use those pronouns, you will want to have it kind of hot dog style, where the folded part is against your lap. And if you identify as a male, you'll fold it like a big triangle and place it on one knee. All right, which glass or salad plate is mine? So I'm sorry, our salad, this should really read as bread plate. Sometimes the salad plate is off to the left where the bread plate is, but either way, that's gonna be on the left and your drinks are gonna be on the right. So don't forget your B and D. Remember, if something gets stuck in your teeth or you have to blow your nose, go ahead and excuse yourself so that you're not taking care of that at the table. And usually the host is going to be the one to pay for the meal, okay? So that really wraps up our content for today. I've got a couple more resources to share with you, but first I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat, and I will stop sharing so that way I can take a look at the chat box and see what questions everyone has. All right, thank you all for your suggestions with the video. I'm sorry about our technical difficulties today. So a question was, what types of questions should we be asking at the meal meeting? So again, asking about someone's career goals or interests, maybe how they got started with the company or what they like working about the company. The food is an easy thing to talk about. So you could talk about, man, what kind of food do you like? Let's see, another question was, will it happen after the first or second round interview? And is it more for positions that work in a group with other people than direct report? So thank you, these are great questions. So a lot of times, these are really great questions. So a lot of times, it actually just depends. So sometimes I'll say I personally have been invited as my first round to a meal because it was a mixer and people were just trying to get a sense of personalities to then invite to an in-person interview, and my normal interview was the second round. But I tend to see more common, and I've also been in this experience where my first round was a phone, my second or phone or video, and then my second round was in person, meaning like I had maybe a group interview, and then after that I had the meal. But it really just depends. I would say, especially around career fair season, we tend to see a lot of mixers happening maybe the night before a career fair or the night after a career fair. And again, that's, so it really just depends. Really depends on the employer. That's a great question. I would say that this would probably be more common with, if you'll be working with a group of people, but I personally have been I should say in a business meal as part of my interview, even if the meal was just with the person who I would be working with directly. So I've been in cases where it's been in a group, but also where it's just been one-on-one too. So it really just depends on who you'll be working with and if it's part of their process to take you to a meal to get you out of the traditional setting. So it's a big, it depends, I think. These are great questions though. All right, so thank you so much. It looks like Zaid has already shared the video for us, so thank you so much for that. There's also a link here to our Cookers workbook. So you can see some of those resources I mentioned earlier in our website. So thank you so much, Zaid, for sharing that information. My email is listed here too. Are there any other final questions that anyone has? Is it okay to talk about the position you're interested in during the meal? Absolutely, absolutely. So you could say what excites you about the position. Because ideally they already have a position in mind for you when you're at this meal with interviewers. And so you can talk about why you're so interested in it and even ask them questions about it. So what are your expectations for someone in this position? What are you looking for in a candidate or in a new team member? Those are great questions to ask. All right. So someone asked, where can we have access to the recorded workshop? Great question. So we are recording all of our workshops right now, and we will have this on our website, hopefully soon. So just keep an eye out for that on our website, but we'll be coming to you soon for sure. So I mentioned being mindful of time earlier, so I recognize that we are after 1 o'clock. So to respect everyone's time, I'm going to go ahead and end our meeting, but you do see my email, I hope, in the chat box. Again, if you would like an overview of all of the notes we talked about today, please do not hesitate to email me and I'll be happy to share that with you. Okay. Then hopefully you can check out this recorded workshop online as well as other recorded workshops that we've had in the past too. All right, thank you everyone. Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, Zaid. Some of our team members who are here sharing information and helping me out today. Thank you for all of you for your feedback and your questions. I hope this was helpful and I hope to see you soon either in person or on the computer.